following show is paid for and brought to you by Peter Savio and Savio Associates, LLC. Capital Convo on AM 690 and FM 94.3. The Answer is brought to you by the Savio Group of Companies, with the belief that we can solve all of our state's problems, including housing, by understanding the issues. We are ready to talk, and we want to hear from you. Join the convo by calling 833-296-TALK. Capital Convo is now in session.
Aloha, Hawaii. This is your state representative, Elijah Pierick, coming to you live from the Salem Media Studio on Oahu. You can hear me from Kauai, Maui, Big Island, and of course, Oahu. I'm joined with two guests. The first is named Trevor. Trevor, tell us a little bit about your name, where you're from, your interests, things like that.
Aloha. Well, I'm originally from Georgia. I went to school at the Citadel in South Carolina. And then I joined the Army, had a bit of a hiccup my first time around and got out, went to South Korea to teach English for about 5 years, then was able to get back in the Army, served about 7 years before getting medically retired. As soon as I was on my way out, I got a job offer here in Hawaii, working one of the national defense missions, pretty much doing what I was doing in the service, and so I jumped at it because, I mean, who doesn't want to live in Hawaii, right? I had never been, but always wanted to go, so I thought it was the perfect opportunity. So came out here, immediately lost my job in a week and a half, got picked up by the next company. 4 months later, got switched to a different company, and now this week I'm starting my fourth job, all in the national defense realm, but yeah, it's been quite the ride.
Quite the ride indeed. Wow. Yes. Okay.
And so I'm also taking full-time classes at UH. So I just like piling things on.
It sounds like you like piling things on.
Yep. Usually doesn't go well.
Okay. Well, hopefully it gets better. Let's talk to now Max Robinson, all the way from Florida. Welcome, Max.
Hello, everybody. I hope all is well. So my name is Maxwell Robinson, originally from Florida. Now I'm a transplant in Hawaii. Graduated from Florida State University, go Noles, with a bachelor's in criminal justice. Found myself pursuing a job in federal law enforcement in Honolulu. And now I'm here, as a part-time on the side. I do firearms instructing with Hawaii Firearms Training Associates. And now I'm fighting for Second Amendment rights here in Hawaii.
That's awesome. Fighting for Second Amendment rights in Hawaii. So what does that look like for you specifically?
Really just a lot of education, starting from, teaching basic handgun classes.
You actually taught me, Max. I don't know if you remember me.
Trevor, I do recall.
All right.
When I saw your name, I was like, man, he's doing it.
Small world, I know.
And I saw that you were filing a lawsuit, Trevor.
Yes, I am. Proud of it.
And I would love to hear more about the lawsuit. I only saw the little snippet on Elijah's Instagram. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, well, we'll be getting into that, I think, a little bit later. Maybe we were going to go over the broader topic of the Second Amendment.
Yeah, so...
Absolutely.
I love it. So go ahead and share with us, what is the Second Amendment, Trevor?
All right, well, I've got it, written right here in front of me. In plain text, as they say, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms, shall not be infringed. And those commas are extremely important because it kind of it goes back to the way that they used to write and talk when the framers were actually putting together the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution, all those things. Their language, their concept of language was different. So what they're really saying when they say regulated is not we get to put restrictions on them. It's not a restrictive kind of regulation. It goes back to the sort of notion of the Blue Book. If anyone is familiar with revolutionary history, They might be familiar with von Steuben's Blue Book, which he gave to George Washington as a kind of manual of arms, and they called it a kind of regulation. The full name of the Blue Book was Regulations for the Order of Discipline of the Troops of the United States. And so just like today in the Army, we have, or I'm not in anymore, but we have Army regulations, and those tell you how to be a soldier. They don't tell you what you cannot do as a civilian. So since a militia is a military organization made up of volunteer civilians, they would require some form of regulation to get them unit cohesion, and that is the language that they're speaking to, not in the restrictive manner that Democrats like to think about today. They love thinking about that today. So being necessary to the security of a free state, it's saying that a militia is necessary for that, and then the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. That's all very, very clear. That's the operative part of that amendment, not the regulation. So it's important to understand that whenever you're having a debate or discussion or whatever with friends and family who may feel like, guns are icky and why do we need them, it's because they are a critical component of national defense and self-defense, which is what the purpose of a militia is. So back in those days, you had outlaws, you had Native American tribes who were not too friendly to people, and then you had the British, of course. So all of those things were something that a militia might be used to defend against. And because you're a civilian making up being a member of a militia, you would need to keep and bear arms on you pretty much at all times, because you never know when things are about to go down. And you would also, of course, need to be well trained on those things. So keeping and bearing them, keeping at your home, on your person, bearing out in the field as a single person or as part of a militia unit, those are all the concepts that the founders were talking about. And if the Bruin decision is any guide, we should be looking at what the founders were talking about in the context that they were talking about. And with that, I yield.
I love it. Thank you, Trevor. So, Max, you are at the federal government level in law enforcement. You have some interests when it comes to guns and such. Can you give us your breakdown on the Second Amendment?
So, to piggyback kind of off of what Trevor said, honestly, a brief statement, a few words, but those few words have a lot of meaning. So, to reiterate it, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So not a lot of words, but a few key ones. So let's break it down. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state. What does that mean? Having an armed, militia in case of a foreign military or entity trying to, take over the United States or cause harm to its citizens. So, obviously you have to have a military in order to be able to protect the United States. Now, that second sentence, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Who are they talking about in that sentence? Now, there's a lot of debate on that, but if you look at the historical context of when it was written, we just got done fighting a war for years against a tyrannical state militia. So they made the Second Amendment in order to be able to defend America, its people, in case the government decided to do that again, they'd have the arms to rebel against it.
Nice. Well, thank you so much, Max, for that explanation. So you're in Florida right now. Correct. Do you have the liberty to talk about your job, or do you want to keep that just federal? Keep it brief.
I'd like to keep that. Just leave that brief. If you wouldn't mind.
Sounds good. Trevor, do you want to talk a little bit about what you did in the Army?
So I started off as a cryptologic linguist trainee, which meant I was training for foreign languages at DLI, Defense Language Institute, over there in Monterey. Unfortunately, didn't do so hot in my testing, and switched over to geospatial imagery analyst. Did great at that, and got stationed in Germany, first time out. Can't get luckier than that. And unfortunately, I guess I could get luckier because that's when COVID came out. Then my second duty station was Hunter Army Airfield. That's when I got my diagnoses of some wacky diseases that I apparently had the whole time I was in. Nothing anyone else can catch, but it's just not conducive to being in the military at that point. So I was medically retired, 100% yippee, and medically retired staff sergeant. Who knew? Never saw that one coming, but that led me here, and so I think God's plan works in mysterious ways. So who am I to have a negative opinion about the good fortune I've experienced. What another key component of this discussion is why fight for the Second Amendment? Why do we need to go so hard on this topic? And some people will say correctly that it's critical to preventing government tyranny, although we can debate about how effective that's actually been. But I would say that the more critical aspect is fighting for the notion of what a right even is. And that's where we can really get a lot of people on the left in our, get them to our line of thinking on the subject. Yes, guns, icky, whatever, but do you like having rights? And if so, where do you draw the line at fighting for them? So I think what we need to be pushing in this fight is, hey, no, really, this is the concept of your having any right on the line. If you don't stop them here, you can't stop them anywhere. You won't be able to stop them. They're already coming for our freedom of speech. Freedom of religion is next in line. And then it's who knows where that stops. So if anyone is a freedom-loving person, they really need to get on board with defending our Second Amendment so that we can prevent any ideas about coming for any of the other freedoms and rights that are enshrined in our Constitution.
That's great. Thank you, Trevor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so all three of us on this show have federal law enforcement experience, if you will, Army, Air Force, what have you. Max, what are your thoughts on people saying, you know what, we don't need this Second Amendment. We've got the military, we've got other forms of protection at the federal level. Let's let them protect us, and let's let the safe citizens not have guns. What would you say to that?
Okay. Well, I think everyone's entitled to their opinion. I think we live in the greatest country in the world. And the fact that we're able to agree to disagree and have these kind of conversations, we're truly blessed. So I'd like to say thank you for that. But what I would respond to that is, if you do not want to own firearms, that's a personal decision. You do not have the right to choose that on other people. Because quite frankly, the odds that you have a cop on your street exactly when you need them, when you begin to run into trouble, is just not realistic. You have a better shot at winning the lotto than that. So if you do not want to protect yourself, by all means, but there's nothing anyone can tell me that's going to make me not love my family. And to me, I carry a gun to protect my family, and the good, honest, hardworking Americans around me benefit, and they don't even know it. If you disagree with carrying a gun in public, a concealed carry holder who's legally permitted in their state and is causing no problems, if something were to happen, they decide to act on it, you are directly benefiting from them carrying their self-defense tool. So really, it's a personal choice. If you do not want to engage in your Second Amendment protected activity, by all means. I do not think we should be forcing guns into the hands of people who don't want them. However, on that same token, if you want to be able to purchase a gun, go through the background checks, go through the proper channels of legally obtaining one, and going through the training and putting all the time into being an honest, hardworking American, I think you should be able to carry guns. And with these recent laws passed in Hawaii, it's unconstitutional.
Yeah. So let's transition now to those unconstitutional laws that you just mentioned. So Trevor, what are those laws at the county level that are unconstitutional, that are basically speaking on behalf of everyone when they're passed at that level, saying that, fill in the blank for us, what are those levels? What are those restrictions?
Sure. So the law governing the right to bear arms in Hawaii is HRS Chapter 134, subsection 21. I'm sorry, not subsection 20. There are multiple subsections. So first and foremost, the most obvious and glaring restriction is the need for a permit to acquire both long guns, so rifles, shotguns, etc., and handguns. And there's an age restriction, 21. You have to be 21 just to get a permit to go out and buy something that you're legally allowed to buy pretty much anywhere else in the United States without such a permit. Debate on whether California counts as being in the United States at this point. But when I was in Georgia, I bought several firearms. I went to my local gun store. I filled out the paperwork, got the background check, cleared very quickly because the FBI has people doing that exclusively, nonstop, all the time. And so the idea that there's this really easy way for criminals to get guns in red states is just laughably wrong. It's easy for you to get as a law-abiding citizen, as it should be, as it should be for anything that you feel like you should have. So basically, the 21 age limit, that's restricting people 18 to 20 from exercising a right that they could go to war and die for, and they can't even exercise it in this state. That's just really wrong. And if I need to explain that further, you might need to read the Constitution once or twice. The next one is you got to give your biometrics and have a photo taken. So that's kind of, I don't know, that just seems a little weird giving those things to the government just to make a purchase. Prove your mental health. Okay. Who can prove, hey, I'm not crazy? You basically have to get the opinion of a doctor just to make a purchase of what is essentially a tool. Give that information to the FBI, and then if you're trying to obtain a handgun, you have to undergo Max's expensive training, which is good training, and I think everyone should do it if they are able to. But it is yet another restriction.
And let's pause right there. Max, can you share with us what your training is?
So I would love to. So our training, it really just depends. We do one-on-one personal instruction. We do basic handgun classes and basic concealed carry classes. Now, like Trevor said, different states, different laws. Hawaii currently at the moment is required you to take a 4-hour classroom portion course and then 2 hours live fire on the range. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you agree with, there is only 2 indoor ranges and 1 public outdoor range, which has pretty much forced me and other folks in the field of instructing to pretty much have to choose between ranges, and we have to shell out money to these ranges. It's not cheap. I tell people, if you're just coming off the street, no experience, to be able to carry a concealed handgun legally in Hawaii is expensive. You have to get a basic handgun class, then you have to take a license to carry course, and they're about to change the requirements that all these people's classes are now about to be invalid, unless you've taken one in the past 4 years. You have to take another one. So we're looking, and then we don't even have a gun yet, right? So you have 2 classes, and you have just purchased a gun. This is with ammo, holsters, proper equipment. You might get concealed carry insurance, perhaps. This could be like $1,000 ordeal.
Wow.
And in Hawaii, which has the most expensive cost of living right next to San Francisco, some people just can't afford that. People, hardworking Americans cannot just shell out $1,000. And I really do try to make my prices competitive and work with my customers and try to cut deals when I can at the gun show. We had a gun show promotion going on. And I really do wish we could make it cheaper, because in my home state of Florida, you actually don't need a permit to carry. It's permitless carry as long as you're 21 years of age and you're not a prohibited person and you have a driver's license. You can carry a gun. Now, I will say, even under permitless carry, you should still get training. Anyone who thinks they could just put a gun in their pants with no training, I have bad news for you. There's going to be a hole somewhere that didn't belong in the first place. I am very pro permitless carry, but I'm also very pro training. You got to get proper training, because if you don't know what you're doing, either it's use of force, knowing where you can carry, knowing where you can and can't carry, knowing when you can use force, it's essential, because you could get yourself involved in a situation that can get you a lot of jail time and fast. But our training usually consists of 4 hours classroom, talking about the laws of the state. So HRS 134 we go over extensively. We talk over the places you can and can't carry. We get you familiar with your firearm drawing from the holster, whether that's open or concealed. As of right now, I don't believe Honolulu County has permitted open carry permits yet. I've applied for them. I've also applied for my concealed, but currently I'm getting jammed up over an issue with non-residents, because if you haven't been living in the state within the past 5 years, you have to submit a mental health check. Despite me being a federal law enforcement officer and me carrying a gun every day for work, and they're not even issuing a permit to me for that reason, which is beyond me. But, every different locality has different laws, different restrictions. Some laws work better in some areas, some don't. That's the great thing about the United States. We can kind of experiment and see what laws work in different places and others. Quite frankly, Honolulu County just had a buyback of 494 guns, and there's been 4 shootings in the past week. So I don't know what Governor Josh Green is thinking is accomplishing, because I promise you, I guarantee you, one of those guns in the buyback was not used in a crime. People just probably had them in their house, either legal or not legal, and just wanted to get rid of them because they didn't feel comfortable in the house with them, or didn't feel like they needed it. And I think it's a shame, because with proper training, that could be a great self-defense tool. And again, everyone's entitled to their opinions. I stress that enough. I'm never going to hate on someone or talk down to someone who doesn't own a gun. I would merely just try to educate them, because I'm not into putting people down. I want to educate you and see, where my logic and your logic, where's the middle ground here? Because that's something in this country we're losing a lot of, is middle ground. People can't agree to disagree. And it's a serious issue, especially in politics today, because people are doing extremely radical things based on these conversations. And I'm trying to bring people together and trying to people, safely, responsibly armed in my classes. I try to do things unique in my classes based on my training and my experience to give to the general public.
Awesome. Well, thank you for giving info to the general public. It sounds like there's good educational courses that can keep people safe that you're offering. And let's go back to the laws. What else is required in the Honolulu County, or I guess the state of Hawaii, to own a gun?
Yeah, so we were talking about the permit to acquire. So there's 2 different kinds of permits to acquire, one for long guns, one for handguns. For long guns, you can get a permit to acquire if you pay a fee, so another restriction, and that only lasts you 1 year. For handguns, you need a permit to acquire for every single handgun that you want to buy. So it's just all of these restrictions are infringements on your right, because they're creating barriers for you to exercise your right. And these barriers, they don't serve a public interest. Bruin and Heller have kind of decided that
What are Bruin and Heller?
Oh, sorry. Those are two Supreme Court decisions, or there were cases that the Supreme Court decided on. Basically, let's do one at a time. Heller was first, 2008. DC versus Heller. It basically undid the DC handgun ban and stated that the Second Amendment is not just for a militia, but is for individuals, and it established the in common use test, basically stating that if a weapon was considered to be in common use by the people, it doesn't really stipulate whether that's in common use by civilians or law enforcement or militaries, but in my opinion, if it's in common use, well, let's back up. In my opinion, if we are expected to outfit a militia, would it not then be prudent to have weapons that are in common use by a military force if we are to go up against a military force? And I can tell you that the cartels in Mexico that are streaming across our borders whenever they please, they have every bit as powerful weapons as our standard infantry soldiers have, if not more so. Like we're talking 50 caliber sniper rifles, AT-4s, which are anti-tank weapons, the works. It's crazy down there. So yes, they established that the Second Amendment is for everyone, not just your mythical militia that's probably not allowed to exist. And then let's see. Sorry, I'm getting all lost in my notes here.
If I could pause you there. Thanks for updating us with that portion of the law. Let's say, so I did go door to door, knocked on 8,000 houses last year, and some, not all, of the neighbors, they mentioned that they don't want Hawaii to become the Wild West. They said, we don't want you to be legalizing everybody carrying guns all the time and basically watching John Wayne walk down the road and having a shootout with somebody. So
I'm a big fan of Wild West movies, and I have to say they've kind of done a disservice to the reality of the Wild West. It just wasn't that wild. It just wasn't. Shootouts just did not happen. Not nearly as much. You'd have your occasional bandits robbing things, but by and large, people got around peacefully, and they did so because everyone was armed. Everyone's armed because they needed to be armed to stay safe in an area that was largely wild. The area itself was wild. You had wild animals that could easily take down a human. You had Native Americans, some friendly, some not. You had bandits of all stripes. You even had, raiders from Mexico coming in at one point during the later parts of the Wild West era. So, yeah, it's just not the case that the Wild West, you saw like shootouts daily. It just wasn't the case.
Thank you for sharing that. If anybody wants to call into our show and ask either Max or Trevor a question about the Second Amendment, county or state laws in Hawaii, you can call the number 833-296-TALK. Again, that number is 833-296-TALK. And we'd love to be able to have a conversation with you as to the Second Amendment. Max, have you ever heard these kind of devil's advocate arguments, or if you will, just, people conscious of maybe the wrong people having guns in Hawaii? In Florida, they have open carry.
So, not quite. So that in Florida, you can only open. I know on YouTube with people like the armed fishermen, you would think Florida has open carry. Surprisingly, Florida you can open carry while hunting, fishing, camping, or engaged to and from. Now, I've heard things are going to be changing this next legislative session going 2024. They're trying to get either permitless open carry or open carry with a permit in Florida. The main concern is that it's going to affect the state of Florida, just like Hawaii, has a large economy on tourism. Disney, Universal Studios, things of that nature. They think open carry is going to change that. Kind of talk about what Trevor said in the Wild Wild West. In 1987, when Florida passed the Self-Defense Act, basically having a shall issue regime of CCWs, meaning you have to issue a permit as long as you meet all the legal requirements, was unheard of. At the time, you couldn't carry a concealed handgun in Texas, which is crazy to think in 1987. You couldn't carry a gun in Texas. But that's just how it was. And people were saying, it's going to be a bloodbath. It's going to be, the OK Corral on the streets. And that is just not what happened. Mm-hmm. Florida, since 1987, we have over 2 million something concealed weapons permit holders. And now I can name, just on my hand, 8 people who are carrying personally close to me under this permitless carry law, which I think is a good law. Because really, nothing's going to change with honest, hard-working people carrying guns if they take the proper training and proper precautions. I could understand some of the hesitation on passing those kind of laws because of, it's going to be a bloodbath, but we're almost 6 months in the state of Florida, and that just hasn't happened. And right now, really, the only thing that's changed is more good people will walk around with guns because bad guys aren't going and getting their concealed weapons permits. The people going and shooting up schools are a gun-free zone. The fallacy that is gun-free zones, that's fake news. Bad guys go into gun-free zones all the time, and the only people who don't have weapons are the good guys. So I think it's time, kind of transitioning into these sensitive places laws in Hawaii, that some of these places should be unrestricted. You should be able to carry a gun at a beach or a park. You should be able to carry a gun on public transit. You mean to tell me just because I can't afford a car and I have to take the bus to work, I am immediately denied a Second Amendment right? That's not okay. We have to find this middle ground here. How do we maintain the rights of individuals while maintaining public safety? I think that's the key question that needs to be answered, and I do not think making the city and county of Honolulu a prohibited area is the answer.
Love it.
It is not.
Thank you for sharing that. We have a caller. Feel free to patch in the caller. Welcome to our show. How are you doing?
Oh, hello. I'm Eileen. I have a question. What about those people who buy guns online and, like buy guns that, where they can put it together? Is that legal?
So I'd be happy to answer that.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd be happy to answer that question. So when you talk about buying guns online, if you're talking about buying it from a website, if you're buying a gun with a serial number, that gets shipped to a federal firearms licensee. That meaning a gun store, someone who's federally licensed, who's required to conduct background checks. So you can just buy a gun online and have it shipped to your door. That's a crime. That's a felony. That's not allowed. So if you buy a gun online, there is a background check. Now, what you're referring to is homemade firearms. In the state of Hawaii, that's illegal. You cannot have parts shipped to your house to make a gun. You register it with the state of Hawaii first, and it needs a serial number. Now, there are some jurisdictions in the United States where you can home build your firearms, Florida being one of them. And people call it ghost guns, which is really just a misnomer for privately manufactured firearms, which this is nothing new. Criminals have been doing this for ages, whether it's pipe pistols or small improvised weapons.
And
in
legally,
prison,
you're supposed to serialize them yourself. So there's...
depending on the jurisdiction. But, like in Hawaii, you can't have a privately made firearm unless you register it in Hawaii. So if someone were to order the parts online, which Honolulu Police Department and the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms has been cracking down on, it's illegal currently in Hawaii to have a privately manufactured firearm without registering it first.
So that kind of...
concern.
Oh, go ahead, ma'am.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's my concern, because to me it seems like the bad guys are the ones that's doing all of this, and how can they track them?
Well, that kind of gets to a different point. The bad guys are going to do what the bad guys are going to do. That's the world we live in. Unfortunately, all we can do is deter them from doing what they want to do. And one good way to deter them is to get more armed good guys out there, and not restrict their ability to exercise this right. These restrictions are turning this right into a privilege. And so one of the greatest things about America is freedom. Our freedom makes us the best country in the world. I lived in Europe. It is not the same. I lived in Australia. It is not the same. I've lived in New Zealand. It is not the same. I've lived in South Korea. It is not the same. Their concept of freedom differs from ours, and that is why we are, we're in a better spot. So what people need to do is embrace freedom. Freedom is scary, but
It's true.
if you don't embrace freedom, what's the alternative that you can embrace? Tyranny, fear. And I personally would rather walk around enjoying my freedom than being fearful that a bad guy is going to do something. And one thing that makes me less fearful of a bad guy doing something is me personally carrying a gun when I do carry, or knowing that there's other good guys out there who are doing the same. And frankly, I have no problem. I swore an oath to defend the Constitution and the American people. And for me, and I think I'm not the only one in this conversation, I would go down fighting if it meant saving my countrymen. I don't.
Amen.
I'd rather go down fighting with a gun, but whatever I have at hand, if it's a sharpened pencil, so be it. But please let me have a gun.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Eileen. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
No, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eileen.
Mahalo nui loa. Folks, you can also join the conversation by calling 833-296-TALK. And just like Eileen, you can join the conversation by calling 833-296-TALK. Let's kind of summarize the laws in Hawaii. And after we do that, we'll talk about the recent laws that were passed this legislative session. Max, do you want to comment more about anything that passed this year or things that were kind of in the works?
So the big one everyone's talking about, Senate Bill 1230, which was signed into law on June 2nd by Governor Josh Green, aka better known as the Sensitive Places Bill. So that's the main focus of this bill. There's a bunch of little other caveats to the bill that were added, but the main focus is the sensitive places, restricting carrying at pretty much everywhere, which I know that sounds ridiculous, but when you break it down piece by piece, I mean, that's really what it was ultimately coming down to, because at the moment when that law was passed, public beaches and parks, restaurants that serve alcohol, whether or not you're drinking, so you could go to an Applebee's or Chili's with your family, you're not even consuming alcohol. You're getting a water and a cheeseburger, and that's a no-can-do. Public transits, banks, hospitals, just certain places, like the list goes on. And then any business that doesn't have a sign saying you can carry. So if there's not a sign that says you can carry, you can't carry that. And now, if you just look at the rest of the United States, there is no other state with a law quite like that requires private business owners to put up a sign saying you can carry. The de facto would be you could carry, and then if they don't want you to carry, they post up a sign. And what weight that carries in each state is different. So, for instance, in some states that have a sign that says you can't carry, that might be treated as a warning. If they catch you carrying, they would tell you to leave, and if you don't leave, you get charged with armed trespassing.
A bad guy is going to see that as an open invitation.
Correct. Now, in some states, you're going to get charged the same as if you walked through an airport with a gun. So it's really important to know the state's laws and where you're allowed to and what you're not allowed to carry. Some penalties are felonies, meaning you lose your gun rights altogether. Some penalties are misdemeanors. So it's really important, even after you take a concealed weapons course, that you refresh yourself and you stay educated, because literally these things can change by the stroke of a pen. And quite frankly, it was so restrictive that someone made a map of Maui and it was found to be that the island was like 96.4% prohibited or something to that effect. And pretty much this bill made it to where the only real legal place you could carry is a public sidewalk, which is just ridiculous. And then they passed laws in adjunction to that you can't leave it in your car unless it's properly secured, which, first of all, I don't recommend leaving guns in cars at all. That is a horrible idea, and that is a great way to arm criminals. So if you can, unless you have a safe or something portable in your car that keeps it secure, if you know you're going to a prohibited place, like, for instance, if you know you're going out drinking with your friends, don't carry a gun. Because not only is that reckless and dangerous, it's illegal. Currently, you can't go out to a bar and drink with a gun, which for obvious reasons, because you're under the intoxication of alcohol, and that affects your judgment, etc. But be smart. Know where you can and can't carry a gun. Know your laws in your local jurisdiction.
Great. Thank you, Max. For those of us just now joining the radio program, you're listening to State Representative Elijah Pierick. I'm a Republican who represents Honolulu, Eva Beach, Waipahu, Kunia, and Ho'opili. I get to serve as the Assistant Minority Floor Leader, and I'm joined by my guest, Trevor, who's a former Army enlisted service member, and he's filed a lawsuit against the state of Hawaii with regards to gun laws. We've been talking about the Second Amendment. We have our another guest, Max. He's a federal law enforcement in Hawaii. So, Trevor, go ahead and share with us what lawsuit you have filed against the state of Hawaii and why.
Sure. So my lawyer, shout out to Kevin O'Grady, is pretty much the man to go to for Second Amendment civil rights issues. And I believe he will be getting assistance from Alan Beck. The two of them actually are currently winning the butterfly knife ban lawsuit.
So correct.
Teeter versus Lopez. What? Sorry, what was that, Max?
No, I said that's correct.
Oh, okay.
Both fantastic Second Amendment lawyers.
Yep. And so the neat thing about that case is that it was elevated to a panel, a 3-judge panel at the Ninth Circuit Court. And if anybody knows anything about the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, they are not too friendly on the Second Amendment. However, most people don't really associate knives with the Second Amendment, and yet arms are arms. Arms constitute any bearable weapon. That's, from a little pocket knife all the way up to an M1 Abrams main battle tank. Those are all arms. So,
Can I just bring in a definition?
Sure.
According to the 2022 U.S. Supreme Court Bruin case, I believe arm is restricted to something that you can carry on your person.
You carry with your hand.
Yeah. Well, so legally speaking, in the United States, that's what they've narrowed it down to. But
correct.
From a dictionary perspective, anyway, that's neither here nor there because we're not going to be carrying around M1 Abrams anytime soon. So, anywho,
I don't think so.
Unfortunately. So they are beating back the ban on butterfly knives. That's a lot of alliteration for you. And they're doing it from a Second Amendment perspective. Basically, the state was trying to argue that butterfly knives are somehow exceptionally concealable and more dangerous than a regular pocket knife, owing to the fact that criminals at the time that the legislation was passed liked to use them. So because criminals liked to use them, that made it illegal for non-criminals to use them. And so it's the very same logic that they used to ban so-called assault pistols, which was a new thing that I learned about when I came to Hawaii. Never heard the term assault pistol before. It's just a nonsensical term in my opinion. But according to the state of Hawaii, an assault pistol is basically an AR-15 or AK-47 style weapon with a short barrel and a pistol brace, which in Georgia, 100% legal. So when I came over to Hawaii, shipped my guns over with my household goods, went to register them at good old HPD. Shout out to those guys. And they informed me of this interesting classification for one of my firearms, which was, just your basic AR-15 with a pistol brace and a shorter than 16-inch barrel. And so they confiscated it.
Whoa.
Yes.
Wow.
And they said that
Oh my gosh.
I would need to either have it sent somewhere to get it modified or have it sent out of the state. And until that time, they would have it in their evidence locker, which I hope it's still in there.
That would make sense why you filed a lawsuit. Okay.
Yes. Basically that constitutes damages to my rights. So it's a measurable thing that I can then argue in court caused me to be deprived of my right. And so that's what we're going to do. And the goal is not, to go after the HPD or anything. It's really just to go after the legislation. But it does beg the question, in my opinion, should the police department, are they required to enforce unconstitutional laws? And that's a question I don't know the answer to. Another question I would have following that one is, are the average citizenry required to follow unconstitutional laws?
Let's ask Max.
Max, do you know if there's anything on the books for that?
Because you're a federal law enforcement officer.
So that is a loaded question.
I know, right? Because I know as a service member, we are not required to follow unconstitutional or unlawful orders.
Mm-hmm.
We can say, no, sir, I'm not going to do that nasty thing you want me to do.
As interpreted by the USMJ
Yes,
for mission
you would
purposes.
then go to jail, but you would have your chance to argue your case.
This is my answer. I'm going to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Well, you kind of have to say that. So. But,
Take that for what you will, but that's the oath I took, and that's the oath I plan on upholding. I plan on protecting the great citizens of this country and all assets, and that's what I plan on doing.
Sure.
And if I could echo that, as a former Air Force officer who served in the Chaplain Corps, it was my core competency to defend the religious rights of my service members, airmen, guardians, and their family members. So if a Air Force or Space Force commander was infringing upon one of my airmen or guardians' religious rights, I was their advocate to get that right. And so therefore, if I was given a commandment, or an order, to say, fill in the blank, infringe this right.
Something vaccine.
We can go on. It's another show. But yeah, basically, it was my job to defend the Constitution, which includes religious freedom for my airmen and guardians.
I actually asserted my religious rights on my way out regarding the vaccine and had them promptly denied. So never really had any recourse on that. But now I'm in this position fighting this fight, so at least I can do some good here. So we'll be filing that one in the coming months. Mr. O'Grady has decided to kind of lump my case in with a few other plaintiffs, and we'll be arguing that one together. So it'd be really interesting to see. He's got so much ammunition these days to work with. I have a whole list of cases that I could cite as to why that is, but suffice it to say, we think it's going to be a winner. And then we have another one targeting the permits lined up once that one's done in who knows how many years. So long story short, that one, the state of Hawaii denied a permit to acquire to me for something that was outside of their own stated laws even. So they weren't even following their own law when they denied that permit. So I am going to try to make the argument that the idea of a permit in and of itself is an infringement on my right, and also they broke their own law.
Thank you, Trevor, for giving us a summary on the lawsuits you're filing against the state of Hawaii. Max, we understand that there was a lawsuit that has already been processed, and a federal judge gave a verdict that certain parts of our state laws that were passed or county laws that were passed this year, 2023, are unconstitutional. Can you give us an update on that?
Happy to. So, Judge Leslie Kobayashi, who is a U.S. District Judge, actually appointed during the Obama administration, funny enough, made it pretty clear that some of the restrictions in the most recent Hawaii carry bill, otherwise known as Senate Bill 1230, are unconstitutional because when you take the Bruin standard, which is basically saying you have to find historical tradition and context in gun laws to make it constitutional. So when you take that standard and apply it to this carry law, there is no basis or historical traditions, which is why there's currently a temporarily restraining order on certain aspects of this law. They were trying to compare banks, for instance, with large gathering places like fairs and how they've restricted access to things like that in the past, which I think comparing a bank to like a carnival is ridiculous. Like, not even the same thing. I would not take my girlfriend to the bank for fun. That's just me.
They're kind of clowning with these interest rates these days, but
right. But I think Ms. Kobayashi had it right on the money. She upheld her oath. She used the Bruin standard and was able, in my opinion, to make sound judgment on the matter within the confines of the law.
Is this Young versus Hawaii?
I'm sorry?
Is the case Young versus Hawaii?
There is another case, Young versus Hawaii, on open carry.
Okay.
There's a separate case. But the specific case for the TRO was based out of a plaintiff in Maui County talking about the public parks and beaches, because there's no other place in the country where you are prohibited from carrying on a public beach or park. Because I don't know about you, I personally plan on having children one day, and if they're at the park, you should be able to have a firearm to protect the keikis. And for anybody who's not in Hawaii, keikis means children. But like I said, there's nothing that anyone can tell me that's going to make me not love my family. So I think people should be able to exercise their Second Amendment rights, not only to protect themselves from, wrongdoers or people with ill intent, but to protect themselves from a tyrannical government who might try to take the constitutionally protected rights away.
Excellent. We've got about a minute left or so in our show, and I want to let the public know that they can watch and listen to this radio broadcast by going to Rep. Elijah Pierick YouTube page. So that's Rep. Elijah Pierick YouTube page. You can watch archives of past radio shows. I'm your host, Representative Elijah Pierick, a Republican serving Hawaii, defending freedom, which includes the Second Amendment. I have a host named Trevor, former Army service member. We have Max, a public law enforcement. Max, can you give us kind of a summarizing pitch to your gun class? If people want to procure guns in Hawaii, how do they do it? How can you help them do that?
Absolutely. If you guys have any questions, because I know we only have a minute, please check out on Instagram at Carry in Hawaii for upcoming classes. And also, please feel free to reach out at my phone, 954-292-9682. I'm available, 24/7. Shoot me a text, give me a ring. Say, hey, Max, I want to buy a gun legally. I want to be armed responsibly. And I'm going to give you the best tools to be able to arm yourself with that knowledge to get to where you want to go.
Great. And Trevor?
I would just tell everyone, God gave us freedom for a reason. Embrace freedom. The opposite of love is not hate, it's fear. Do not fear freedom.
Thank you so much, Hawaii, for tuning in to The Answer, the channel, Capital Convo, this show, on 690 AM, 94.3 FM, Mondays from 5 to 6 p.m. Please tune your radios to that station at that time. Aloha.
Capital Convo on AM 690, FM 94.3. The Answer was brought to you by the Savio Group of Companies, with the belief that we can solve all of our state's problems, including housing, by understanding the issues. Join the convo every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 5 p.m. right here on The Answer.